Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 187 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, college football fans and Husker fans. Very happy Husker fan.
Yes. Happy for a change this particular Tuesday as we're recording this podcast.
Yeah, Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I might add.
That's right. So today we are here to chat about our favorite sport, college football, a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. Father-son duo here today to talk about our favorite team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, their big victory over Wisconsin in both football and volleyball, and the implications for what was a pretty crazy weekend of college football and what it means for the upcoming conference championship games.
Right. I mean, it's getting down to nitty-gritty time, and now these decisions matter, right?
Right. Now we're getting to the part of the season where, the playoff rankings really become important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But before we dive into all that, we're going to stick with our tradition and open up a cold beverage. I got myself my last Golden Road Mango Cart.
Oh, well, I'm drinking I'm down here now in Arizona, and I'm a huge fan of the Kilt Lifter, which is a Four Peaks Brewing Company's signature product which I love. But I'm drinking the Wow Wheat from Four Peaks Brewing tonight, trying to clear out the refrigerator a little bit before we go on vacation.
There we go. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah. We should say that the plan is that you and I are actually going to be together for Thanksgiving. We'll be able to watch the upcoming Nebraska game together and hopefully record an in-person podcast about it.
That would be wonderful.
All righty. So to dive into things, we gave our predictions on the previous podcast for how we thought the Wisconsin game would go. I was the optimistic one, and I predicted that we would win in a lower scoring game of 20-17. Well, you predicted that they would win 28-13 over us. The final score, of course, ended up going our way. I ended up winning that particular bet, Mr. Pessimistic.
Well, you know what? I will concede that I am a doubting Thomas until I can see us now. So that's why this game and this upcoming week is, to me, is so critical, right? It's just going to be really, really critical. Because, we've been kind of up and down. What I'd love to do is see us play two relatively complete games in a row. Because I would look at this game that we just had, Alex, and say, this was one of the most complete football games we've played all season.
Yes, and that final score of that game was 44-25, so much higher scoring than either of us were anticipating after, we've been struggling to get to 20 points a lot of games this season on offense. All of a sudden, we were able to really make it happen against a Wisconsin team that nearly beat number 1 ranked Oregon just the previous week.
Right, exactly. And you kind of question, how in the heck, did that happen, right?
Yep. Well,
wow.
On the other hand, right, we played it close with Ohio State too, who then, as we'll talk about later, crushed Indiana this past week, who crushed us, right? So, it's all about how you're playing on the day, right?
Right, exactly. That's true. Yeah, that's where the transitive property doesn't work very well, right? So
no, it does not. But to your point, we had pretty good control of the game in the first half, and then starting in like the third quarter, our defense started to let some things go. We let them get 2 kind of pretty quick touchdowns off of big plays, which kind of kept them in the game to some extent, kept it from being a complete blowout where we could, start putting in our second and third team guys. But overall, considering I thought we'd win by, 3 points and you thought we'd lose, we got to be happy with this. The Nebraska fans rushed the field after the game. We finally got our 6th win to guarantee a bowl game. And amazingly, this is our first win against Wisconsin since we joined the Big Ten.
No, that's not true. It's our first win maybe in Lincoln, in Lincoln, since we joined the Big Ten. But we beat Wisconsin one of the years. In fact, it was the year that they then beat us. Later in the year, we played in the Big Ten championship game. This was way back when, at the very right after we'd gotten in the league, and we were leaders in Legends division. Do you remember those?
Yep.
Divisions? Yeah. And Wisconsin was in the other division, and we were Legends and they were leaders or whatever, and they won the other side and we won the Legends side, and then we played in the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis and just got crushed. They annihilated us.
Right. Okay. It was our first win over them since 2014.
There you go. That makes more sense.
Okay. So I wasn't quite right with my my full statement there, but regardless, it's been a long time.
It had been a long time, and they have absolutely had our number. But here's the thing: if you looked over the history, in fact, maybe I'll pull that up while we're talking here. The number of those games that were super close, went into overtime.
Right.
It's crazy. There have been a few blowouts by Wisconsin where they've pretty much comfortably beat us by 2 or 3 scores or whatever. But many times it's been a 3 to 7 point game, and it's gone into overtime a few times in that stretch of 10 years.
Right. So, well, that's not uncommon if you look at Nebraska's schedule, right? There's the big tally of how many 1-score games we've lost, right?
Right.
Just in general.
But particularly with this team, I would say, and like we have that history with Northwestern, and we probably have the advantage on them in that, but lots and lots of close games against Northwestern over the years, and then tons of close games with our upcoming opponent, Iowa, as well. So,
right. To your point, though, when you look at the stats of the game, you do see how Wisconsin was able to have some success against us. We had 473 total yards of offense, while they had 407. Now, part of that is that they had some successful drives that then resulted in field goals that they missed. They missed 2 field goals in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there are some points they left on the board. On the other hand, you'll recall there was a drive we had in the third quarter where we had a pass go right through our receiver's hands that would have been a touchdown, and instead we had to settle for a 45-yard field goal. So we left some potential points up off the board as well. But in general, when you look at the stats, we had 29 first downs, 180 yards of rushing, 293 passing, only a few penalties, 4 total. Had better time of possession, 4 of 9 on third downs, 7 of 7 red zone scores. That's a good one.
That is beautiful. Yep. 5 of those touchdowns too. That's the key, right? Like we didn't settle for a bunch of field goals.
Exactly. And in particular, I want to highlight Emmett Johnson and Barney, our receiver. Emmett had 113 yards rushing it, and then also had 85 yards on the receiving end, while Barney had 85 of his own. So Emmett just had a stellar game overall, and we were able to find a nice kind of balance between running him and then running Dowdell that was pretty effective.
Right. Well, and again, it was that changeup, and I kind of like using Dowdell as the punishing changeup rather than the opposite, which was the before this last couple of games, it was the reverse, where Dowdell was getting the majority of the carries, and the changeup was to bring out the quick scat back. But I think it really allowed Emmett to kind of get into a flow, get into a rhythm of the game. And boy, he just looked really good, right? His movement, his ability to make guys miss was tremendous in this game.
Yeah, definitely. He was super impressive. Dylan had a good game, was making good decisions generally. We only had one interception while we were able to force 2 turnovers from Wisconsin. So that also went in our favor. And we as we mentioned, we got a couple field goals as well that were solid and good. So John Hull is proving to be steady for us. So yeah, just a lot of positivity coming out of this game. It's clearly looking like the bet that Matt Rowe made of bringing in Dana Holgerson late in the season seems to have paid off. We got to the 6th win. On the podcast we did during the bye week, we talked about, the different scenarios, right? Where how many wins do we get? The 3 wins would be amazing. And then there's 2 wins, 1 win, 0 wins. So we're 1-1, right? We lost USC, but we beat Wisconsin, who we said was probably the most beatable left on our schedule. And now we have to go away against Iowa, who beat Wisconsin pretty soundly when they played previously. But on the other hand, Iowa lost to UCLA, who we also lost to, right? And they have some quarterback issues that make that game more interesting.
Well, yeah, except that, they've been able to plug just about anybody in at that quarterback position. And because their system is so well ingrained and their offensive line and their defense is playing so well, so consistent, I should say, that, they have the number 1 rushing team in the Big Ten. And the number 1 rusher, I think, in the country, or certainly one of the top 3 or 4. I don't remember exactly where he is, but he's already broken a record for most rushing touchdowns in a season, and he still got the Nebraska game to go. Right. So
Yeah, I do want to mention real quick about the Wisconsin game. Apparently, one quote that came out at the end of the game was, "This is the last time we will celebrate 6 wins," which is a great indication of just where we want the trajectory of the program to go. And interestingly, for your obscure stats out there, for the first time since 1939, Nebraska went their entire 7-game home schedule without giving up a rushing touchdown, which is a credit to our defense, but I think also just goes to show the general change in college football, right? And that a lot of the teams just pass it more than they used to, obviously.
Well, and not only do they pass it more, but they particularly pass it more in the red zone.
Right.
See, people just lining up and playing smash mouth football to get into the end zone. That was kind of the way when passing was just getting started. It was okay. You pass, basically between the 20s, but once you get into the red zone, then you run the football. And now I feel like philosophically and in terms of coordination of the offense, most coordinators now tend to see more opportunity to score using the throwing game than the running game, unless they're inside the 3, right? So if you're on the 8-yard line now, they view that much more as a passing down than as a run, So it's kind of an interesting change or evolution in how the game is called, not just they're running the ball less and throwing it more.
Right. And then I found this interesting tweet that kind of summarized something that Dana Holgerson said in a recent interview or press conference. He mentioned how Nebraska had a very large playbook with a variety of NFL minds like Rule and Raiola Sr. on our staff adding to it. And part of Holgerson's job is simplifying that for the players. He said, quote, "If it doesn't make sense to me, it ain't going to make sense to them," unquote.
Yep. Well, I think there's some lots and lots of truth to that. It's interesting. As I look at the stats for the game, Alex, which I said I kind of wanted to do before we got too far into this, and you highlighted a couple of things. So on the positive side, 29 first downs is a very attractive total to have in a game, but 29-15, which was the differential, that's huge, right? Because they actually had their average per play was 7.4 yards. Our average was 6.4, right? So it's not like they weren't having success on offense. It was that they were not converting on third downs, right? And converting to first downs, and they weren't getting scores because they missed 2 field goals, and some of their touchdowns were on huge plays, huge
Right.
individual plays, which that's what skews these statistics like average per play and stuff.
Right.
But
Well, like I want to say their total rushing yards for the game was 115, but before that kind of period in the third quarter where we let up those big drives, I want to say it was closer to like 60. Like we had really shut down their rushing game up to that point.
right, yes, and we'll come back to this point and looking at they average 4.6 yards per rush, which is way too high, right? Like if Iowa averages that, then we lose. I can tell you that right now. We're going to have to do a way better job of defending the run if we hope to win this coming week. But that's where those statistics can be a little misleading because of how the game played out. But what I'm most excited about is that big first down total and the efficiency in the red zone.
Yes. Now, of course, yes, talk about this Iowa game. It is an away game for us. It's their senior day. The opening spread from Vegas was plus 4.5 for us, so minus 4.5 for Iowa. So they're considered slight favorites, which I think is good for our mentality as a team because it's like, okay, we've gone over the main hump, right, of getting to a bowl game. This is what the minimum that both Rule and the fans have kind of set out for him. So now we can hopefully play a little bit more openly and freely, knowing, hey, we're the underdog. We got nothing to lose. We're already going to our bowl game, but let's get to 7 wins here because Iowa is a bit wounded, right? Like I mentioned, they've lost several quarterbacks this year, including their original starter, Cade McNamara, and then like the backup that came to replace him is gone. So now they're down to their 3rd or 4th string quarterback, which is this Jackson Stanton guy.
Right.
And they played against Maryland last week and won solidly 29-13. But interestingly, when you actually looked at that game, they were only up 19-13 in the 4th quarter and had 5 field goals in the game. So there was a number of situations where they were kind of like Nebraska has been this season, right? Driving the ball into the red zone area, but then not being able to score and having to settle for field goals. And this Stanton guy, I want to say only threw about like 15 passes in the game, and they were very conservative, knowing that this guy is, not a superstar or whatever, and just handing it off to their great running backs. So to me, the highlight for this week, or the spotlight, I should say, is really on our defensive coordinator to see if he can come up with a game plan that really exploits this clear weakness on Iowa's side of the ball, right? Like shove a ton of people at the line of scrimmage and basically dare them to throw it, right? And trust that your defensive backs will be able to, exploit a bad pass by this inexperienced quarterback.
Right. Well, Alex, I mean, on a simple level, you're absolutely right. Of course, the reality is that much like the Maryland game, if you look at that Maryland game, it was close, but then of course in the 4th quarter they were able to crease the one big run that they needed, and they had their big running back go for about 60 or 70 yards, and that created that final separation that they needed to win the football game. And so it is really, really hard to play defense against an Iowa running attack for 60 minutes and not get gashed a couple times. And so that's what concerns me. But like on the positive side, again, what I'm excited about is we had our most complete game. Our special teams played well, right? Last week, our defense played adequately. And they were guilty of giving up big plays. They were guilty of having some. I mean, there was some kind of an error in either defensive call or defensive assignment that gave up a huge pass play where the guy was just wide open, just ran right past our defense. And then we had kind of a goofy broken play that should have been maybe at best a 15-yard gain, and the guy catches the ball. Two of our guys kind of run into each other or whatever, and he spins, and all of a sudden he's running free down
Right.
the field, and he ends up getting about 60
Well,
or so yards on a reception.
right. I think the one I'm thinking of, it was a missed tackle where our guy was there, but he just kind
Yeah,
of whiffed on the tackle. And there were a couple of those in this
right.
game. Obviously,
Yeah,
Wisconsin has beefy guys, so that's one of the strengths of their team is that they're hard to tackle. But I noticed that several times in this game, so I'm hoping that's something Tony is scrimmaging this week.
I hope so too, because the fact is that we've never faced so far this season a better running back than the guy we're going to see this week. I mean, that guy's got great balance. You watch him, and he just doesn't get tackled by the first guy. You know how our guys go down with shoestring tackles. The first guy that touches them often tackles them or knocks them off balance. This guy never falls on the first contact. And when you say, well, then we're going to gang tackle, we got to just get a lot of guys around the ball. And you know what? That can work and work and work and work. And then one time it doesn't. And on the one time when the gang isn't there to help you tackle, guess what? He's gone to the races. And so I expect that to happen. I think we have to just concede that. But what I don't want is it can't happen 4 times. In fact, I don't want it to happen 2 times. I can accept maybe it happening once, and then it's incumbent on our offense to find some ways to move the football and score against them, and just outscore these guys, because they're going to get some points with this running game. Because even if Coach White is able to call a really good game, I think that we're gonna give up some points because we're gonna have some breakdowns, which we've had in every game this season. And when those breakdowns happen, I guarantee you Iowa's going to be there to take advantage of it. And then, like every year, Iowa's got a great kicker, they've got a great punter, and they're going to flip the field.
Right.
Right? They're going to flip the field. So
No.
so that's what we can expect going over there
Right.
to Iowa City.
Well, like I mentioned, they had 5 field goals in that Maryland game, and one of them was like 54 yards. So, yeah,
Yeah.
they definitely have the advantage on the special team side of things. And their defense is very good, but my hope is that Dana has unlocked something with the offense by simplifying it and calling the game the way he did last week. And the fact that Dylan now has some extra confidence, right? We stopped this 4-loss streak that we were on. Emmett Johnson had a great game, so we're definitely going to be going to him quite a bit in this one as well. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to throw enough wrinkles that Iowa isn't expecting, that we'll be able to score some points. And then if Tony White rises to the challenge I'm giving him to be a great defensive coordinator, is able to really go hard on Iowa's obvious weakness of throwing the ball, then I think we'll be able to win this game in an upset.
Right. Well, and I mean, we certainly are capable of it. I mean, I was just looking at the win-loss history with Wisconsin, and I was mentioning to you that, it had been like 10 years since we had won a game against them, and we really have only beaten them once since joining the Big Ten. But, if you look at the scores of about 4 or 5 of these games, it was 30-27. It was 21-23. It was 17-23. It was 28-35, 14-15, 17-24 last year. I mean, a lot of one-score games.
Yeah.
And games that we very well had the lead in at various times, right? So, and then they would come back and physically dominate in the fourth quarter and pull out for the victory. So we need to change that trajectory starting now for not only a Wisconsin, relationship or history, but now we have that same thing because we have the same close history with Iowa as well, where there's been so many of those games that have been won by 3 or 7 points, and we need to be able to win one of these games, just based on the fact that we got to have our athletes, make one more play than their athletes do, because I know we can't completely shut them down. I mean, White's defense is not gonna do that, because Iowa's going to find a way at some point. We might hold them for a whole half without scoring, right? But then they'll come out with adjustments, and all of a sudden they're moving the ball. You know what I mean? So you just got to know that's going to happen and be mentally prepared for that.
Right. But I would say if we did do that, like held them scoreless for a half and our offense did all right and we went up, 21-0 by halftime or whatever, in the games we typically play with Iowa that are lower scoring and, special teams based and stuff, that's huge. That's a big lead. So even if they do give up, another few touchdowns in the second half after they make some adjustments, as long as our offense keeps up the momentum, then we'll have enough of a score gap to win. That's kind of what we did against Wisconsin, right? We went up early and we're able to keep that lead throughout the game. Even when we did make some mistakes in the second half, our lead was big enough that we didn't really feel the pressure, right? There is still the risk that if it becomes a one-score game or very close to it in the fourth quarter late, that we will tense up again, as we are wont to do. We have not shown that we can overcome that yet. So in an ideal world, we go up big early and we coast from there.
Right. And I would love that. I would love to just crush them, right? But at the same token, I would also love to win a close game as long as we win it, because then that might help us to begin to believe that we can win a close game. Iowa is in a close game almost every week, right? Like, it's rare that they win going away. And if they do, it's because they had an explosive fourth quarter, right? So they played 3 quarters where the game was in doubt and it wasn't obvious that they were way better or whatever. And then they pull it out at the end.
Right.
And they're so comfortable doing that it doesn't bother them at all.
Well, and to your point, let's not forget that last year when Iowa had a historically good defense and played in the Big Ten championship game, we should have beaten them. We were in the lead in that game, and then we collapsed in the fourth quarter, like you said, and lost it narrowly. But, in terms of overall win-loss record and everything, that Iowa team was better than this Iowa team, which is only 7-4. Now, obviously, they did change their offensive coordinator, and that has changed things up for them, made some improvements. But like I said, their quarterback is like their third or fourth string guy. So I'm feeling bullish right now. Maybe it's a little overconfidence because we just had a win. But I'm going to say that we beat Iowa, and I'm going to say the score is lower scoring than the Wisconsin game, but something like, let's say 31 Nebraska to 17 Iowa.
Wow. That would be awesome. God, that would be so great. And like I said, I'm yet to see Nebraska put 2 complete games together in a row. So we've done that now with this Wisconsin game where our defense played well, our offense played well, and our special teams had probably their best collective game of the season. So, but that was all at home. That was in the comfy confines of Memorial Stadium. This is going to be over there in Iowa City, and it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge. And it's senior day for the Iowa seniors. So I think that's going to be a tough road to hoe. I'm gonna predict a Nebraska victory for the same reasons. I'm ready to believe in Dana Holgorsen a little bit, that he's gonna be able to turn the tables here a little bit and continue to have us be more successful in offense than we have been being. But I also think we're going to make a few mistakes. Their defense is so incredibly opportunistic that they're going to be a factor in this. But I also am hopeful that we can be opportunistic. And when they do try to throw it, that we maybe are able to take advantage of that, whether that's stopping them on some critical third downs, or better yet, that there is some interceptions that are available to us that help us to nurse the game along. But I'm going to say we're going to win the game. It's going to be 24 degrees for a high temperature on Friday, and the game doesn't start till like 6 o'clock, so it's already going to be getting cold. Right, 24 is the high that will happen at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and then the the temperature is just going to be declining. So the game's going to be played with temperatures in the teens. Now, I don't know what the wind is going to be. If there's any wind hardly at all, oftentimes it will be calm. But if there is wind, then all of a sudden you got wind chills that drop below zero. And so
Right.
I'm going to predict that Nebraska is going to win this game 20-17.
2017. Okay, that was my score from last week. Um, I will just mention I did see one stat from a Iowa fan, and this was a couple weeks ago, so maybe out of date now. But basically, they were averaging about double the amount of points at home than they were away. So Iowa this season has had a distinct advantage at home, which is something that we should definitely take into account.
Right, right. But again, that was when they had healthy quarterbacks.
Right, with the healthy quarterback. And the other thing I was going to mention is that something we definitely did see in this Wisconsin game, even though the defense did give up some big plays, is that we got a lot of pressure on their quarterback. He was having to throw on the run a lot.
Right.
And if we can make that happen with this young, inexperienced quarterback at Iowa, make him uncomfortable, make him make some mistakes, that would be ideal.
Yeah. Well, I think if we have some success in that area early in the game, let's say in the first 2 or 3 series, when they go back to throw, if we're getting pressure, if we're succeeding in that regard, they'll stop throwing it. They're completely comfortable running the ball 3 times to get 10 yards and occasionally going for it on 4th down when they're in the midfield area, because they trust their defense and because they trust that their offensive line and their great running back will be able to break a tackle and find a way to get that 10 yards in 4 plays. So I think you can expect to see them go for it on 4th down quite a bit, especially if they get to midfield. And if they get even a little past midfield, obviously they have the kicker to at least attempt some field goals and see if they can rack up and accumulate some points that way, and just put the wrenches to Nebraska and stress us out by putting scoring pressure on us. Not with a bunch of big explosive plays, but just slowly but surely, going up 3, then 6, then 9, while we're struggling to move the length of the field because we self-destruct on series after series. That's their whole game plan, is we're going to wait till you make mistakes. And I expect that to be the exact same approach that they use against us this year, because that's what they always do.
Right. All right. And we'll make quick mention here of the ladies and the Nebraska volleyball team. They had a very big game this last week against Wisconsin, the rematch that was at home for Nebraska. You predicted that they would lose 1-3, while I predicted they would win 3-1. And it ended up going my way. In fact, it went even better than I thought it would, where we won once again in 3-0 in sets. So we're 6-0 on Wisconsin in our 2 games this year, and we're in great position to go to the Big Ten championship game. How's that make you feel?
It makes me feel really wonderful. And again, if you had watched Wisconsin in any of the games since our first meeting, you would have looked at their offensive production and their prowess and the improvement in their backcourt play, and just say, oh my gosh, this is going to be a much tougher out for Nebraska. And Nebraska, on the other hand, had been kind of meddling in their offense in the games leading up to this matchup, where we had been okay but not great on offense, but we had been great defensively.
Right.
And in this game, then 2 things happened. One, Nebraska's a performance, their comfort level with what they're doing and what they're trying to accomplish is just, it's very apparent. It's obvious what they're trying to do, and they do a really good job of doing it, right. And they do it with minimal errors from the service line. They still are having more errors attack-wise than I would like them to have, but their service pressure, although they don't get a lot of aces, they are getting the ball exactly where they want it to be and basically making the opponent predictable on offense. Now, defensively for Wisconsin, they were missing 2 key players on their team for our game. Their starting libero for most of this season was out, and the other player who was their number one defensive specialist, who had also had the libero jersey for part of the season early in the year, those two players were both out, and so they were starting. They were starting a libero who was a true freshman. No, excuse me, a redshirt freshman, but who is coming off some major knee surgeries and had not really played all that much. And then another freshman who had also not played much at all. And both of those players were responsible for about half of Wisconsin's service errors. And Wisconsin was very high error at the service line compared to us. I think we had 3 or 4 service errors throughout the 3 sets, and they had like 11 or 13. And so that was a huge discrepancy there. And then the other thing that was amazing by the end of the end of the game, which it notes the difference, is we had 54 digs in a 3-set match, which is quite high. That's a very good number. And they had 17 less, which is huge. So the lack of their ability to consistently pass the ball and to dig the ball ended up being their demise. And so they were never comfortable. And it was a close match, but we kind of were in control the whole time.
Right. I have it here. They had 11 service errors to our 4.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So that's a huge thing. And not only the quantity, but the timing, right? Like right at a point when they might be on a 2 or 3 or 4 point run where they're getting back into a set because we had extended a lead and then they closed the gap, then they would serve a service error, right at the worst possible time for them. So all of those factored into us winning 3-0, but it was wonderful. I was worried, you'll recall from last week, because it was senior night. I know that's always a very emotional night for the team, and oftentimes they don't play their best on senior night. And this was not necessarily their best performance either. This wasn't the best performance by Nebraska, but it was very clear that they were ready, they were prepared, and they executed their game plan. We still had errors. One of our most threatening offensive players, Andy Jackson, probably had her worst game of the season, and yet we still won 3-0. So those are all good signs. And yeah, so the exciting thing is that now we have 1 week. With that victory, we're still undefeated in the Big Ten. And if John Cook even said it during media days at the beginning of the season, with the addition of the 4 West Coast schools, who are all outstanding volleyball teams, right? All of them have reached Final Fours, won national championships, multiple national championships in the case of USC and UCLA. Washington's won a national championship. Oregon hasn't won a national championship, but they have been to the Elite 8 and the Final Four multiple times. They're really a good team. With the addition of those 4, no one's going undefeated in this league. Yet Nebraska's two games away from accomplishing that feat, which I don't think anybody would have predicted that anybody could do that. But it's because of the maturity of our team. We've been extremely consistent. We don't have the highest ceiling. I think Wisconsin has a higher ceiling than we do, even this year. But our our floor is pretty damn high. And that's what's really buoyed us through this very difficult conference season. So now we have a huge test left, one huge test, and then just kind of have to gut our way to a final victory against Maryland on Saturday. But on Friday, we have to go into Penn State, play in that gym, which was just voted the most difficult gym to play in NCAA volleyball. It is the toughest road environment in the country, and it's going to be a whiteout. What's frustrating is I just watched the most recent match that Penn State played, and literally a third of the gym was empty, of their facility was empty, and you will be amazed when you watch the game on Friday. It will be an absolute zoo. It'll be a whiteout. There'll be 8,000 cheering fans or whatever the number is that can fit into that place with their white pom-poms, and they're very vociferous. And because it's a smaller gym, they are literally right next to the players when they're serving. It's crazy how close their student section is to the serving line. So it's a tough place to play. Last year, we had to come back from two sets down. It ended up being a reverse sweep, and we won it, but just barely. If we can win that game, Alex, then we have Maryland, which we should be able to beat. Although the Maryland game will be a sellout. It's been a sellout now for a couple of weeks, and there might be upwards of 8,000 people at that match. Now, the good news is half of them might be Nebraskans.
Right.
So we might be playing in a very friendly environment against Maryland, because Maryland has had kind of a struggling season where they're right about 500 for the season, and they're not going anywhere, and they're not going to the tournament. So their season is basically over after they play us. So our game will be, but yet they have probably some of the best serving players in the entire NCAA. They have a gal that's just been serving lights out. Last game, she had 7 aces.
Wow.
Which is crazy. Yeah. And so that's not a game you can just sleep on.
Right.
But obviously the first priority is Penn State.
Okay. Yep. So we'll be paying attention to that. Hopefully the girls stay undefeated in the Big Ten and get to go to that Big Ten championship game.
Well, no, they don't. There is no Big Ten championship game. If they win against Penn State on Friday, then they are guaranteed a share of the Big Ten championship. If they win against Penn State and Maryland, we win the championship outright.
I see. Okay. Make quick mention of this in terms of Nebraska football. It was announced that Malachi Coleman is transferring out of the program, which is a disappointment, as he was a player with a lot of talent that we were looking forward to seeing. On the other hand, Jamari Butler confirmed that he'd be returning next year for another season. So that's some news, off the field news, in regards to Nebraska football.
Yep, and with these new limits on roster, we need to get comfortable with the fact that we're going to lose some guys we wish we weren't going to lose, and because our roster size is in the vicinity of 150 players, and we got to get down to 105. And Coach Rule, I don't know that all the definition is there, but there seems to be enough definition that he now knows there's not going to be any transitional years. They're not going to let him go down from 150 down to, say, 125, and then next year after that get down to 105. Nope, they're not doing that. They're saying this is the roster limit, and that is what it is.
All right, so now getting down to the national world of college football. We did give some predictions last week. The big one was, of course, Indiana versus Ohio State. I sided with Indiana, thought they would win 35-31. We predicted that Ohio State would win, but in a close game, 35-31. And it ended up going Ohio State's way with a bigger scoreline of 38-15. Kind of an ugly first half on both sides of the ball, but Indiana just in general showed their nerves. The fact that they had this huge spotlight on them. They had some special teams mistakes and things like that. Only had 153 total yards in the game. So yeah, it was never really in question after a certain point.
Right. Indiana showed that they were stressing, that they were under duress for the first time, and they behaved like any other team under duress. And so you now look back on the history of their season, and you realize that they were blessed. Positive things happened for them. They seldom were behind the entire season, and how do they behave when they're up against it and things are not going their way? Say late in the second half, and they kind of fell apart a little bit, just like a lot of other teams do, right? So the invincibility thing kind of dissipated rather quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that game didn't turn out to be as exciting as we were hoping. And then there was the Army-Navy game. I predicted that Notre Dame would win that one. I predicted that they would win 21-17 for Notre Dame, whereas you predicted that Army would pull off the W 31-21. But that one ended up going Notre Dame's way in even more dramatic fashion than the previous game, 49-14.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Army. I mean, they just weren't able to. They were not able to hang with it. It just wasn't going to happen, sadly. And it also indicates that Notre Dame. After I'm almost tempted to go back and look at that Northern Illinois game and figure out how in the heck Northern Illinois beat them, because they've righted the ship and they're doing quite well and are likely to be part of that 12-team playoff.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, thankfully, those games kind of disappointed, but there were plenty of other great games this season, or this week, I should say. Particularly in the SEC, there were a lot of big-time upsets that have really kind of shaken up the playoff field, which we'll be talking about a bit later. In the Big Ten, though, there was Penn State versus Minnesota. Penn State won, but only by 1 point, 26-25. Amazingly, it was 10-10 right before right around halftime. But Penn State had a blocked punt that was returned for a touchdown. That led to a touchdown, rather. So there was a lot of crazy stuff in that particular game. There's even a blocked PAT that was returned for 2 points for Minnesota. But Minnesota was -2 on turnovers on the day. So that hurt their chances. And then Penn State, to their credit, were very gutsy. Late in the fourth quarter, it was a 4th down, and they went for a fake punt that they got that kept their drive alive, that led to their score. Or actually, I don't think they scored, but I think they just ran out the clock with that drive, and that won them the game.
Right. Well, and you know what? I mean, that's just late season Big Ten football. Everybody's tired. I know our coaches were talking about how many guys were playing sick, right? When we had gone out to USC, apparently USC had a bunch of people who were sick, and then and they passed it on to our team, and we had people with flus and with strep throat and all this kind of stuff. So Nebraska's been working, all through last week and even through this week. They're still dealing with people who are missing practice because of strep throat. You just don't know what's going to happen. That's why they play the game, and that's why you can get some unusual results here late in the season.
Yeah. And another really crazy one this time in the SEC was Alabama versus Oklahoma. I think we mentioned that game on the last podcast, and you said, Alabama's going to kill them. But actually, it went Oklahoma's way pretty solidly, 24-3. Alabama was down 3-1 on the turnover margin, and it was actually that same score, 24-3 in the third quarter. Alabama nearly had a touchdown after that, but it got called back on a penalty that was a result of a loss of down. I think it was a 4th down play, so they just got nothing out of that. Alabama kind of had more yard. If you look at the yardage, they did get some yards on them. So the score probably should have been a little different, but Oklahoma held on and got a big win that really helped out Brett Venables. Yes,
absolutely. That win is probably going to save Brent's job and might very well establish the Indiana coach at IU for a while, because I really think that was the job that I thought I was reasonably confident was going to become opened at the end of this season, because I just feel like Oklahoma is so underachieved, and I think that their athletic director has to be nervous, because you can't, if Oklahoma goes 3 years into the SEC without any success, then they run the risk of being the next Nebraska that goes from blue blood to also ran in a short period of time, and then trying to climb that mountain back up to respectability to where you're, getting the premier recruits and you're getting that kind of level of talent that would allow you to compete with the Georgias and Alabamas and Tennessees and Texases of the world in your conference. It's going to be really, really hard to do if they have 3 years like this year in a row. And so the question is, how long is their AD willing to wait?
Right. And then this game was pretty interesting. Florida versus Ole Miss. I got to watch kind of the second half of that game on Saturday. Florida went up against Ole Miss. Ole Miss had a missed field goal, and Florida got two crucial stops on fourth down in like the red zone territory. So they put a stop to Ole Miss's scoring chances there. But even with all that, Ole Miss had a chance to maybe have a good drive at the end of the game to tie it. They threw an interception. Then Florida got the ball 3-and-outed. Ole Miss got the ball back again, had another chance to have a drive to score, and threw another interception. So that's how the game ended.
Wow. Now, you've mentioned just in these last couple of minutes, three of the teams that are potential opponents for Nebraska in a bowl game.
Right. I was listening to the Bussin' with the Boys podcast earlier today, with some Nebraska alumni and all that. And they were mentioning how when the bowl selection becomes available, regardless of whether Nebraska wins against Iowa or not, although winning against Iowa will certainly help, Bulls are going to be hungry to grab Nebraska because Nebraska fans historically travel well. And now there's even more pent-up demand because we haven't been to a bowl game in so long. So they were thinking that, there's a good chance we'll be paired up with a pretty good SEC team.
Right. And the reality is that, it's not going to be fair because we're going to be playing a team that's probably won two more games than us, that's clearly had a way better season than us, but we've been promoted up the pecking order, if you will, of bowl games simply because bowl games, those people want butts and seats. These bowl games are primarily, destination management organization events, and they're all about tourism and, getting visitors to the community and all that. And so they will absolutely pick Nebraska over, say, even an Iowa, or a Minnesota, or if Wisconsin were to beat Minnesota and get to 6 wins, I think we would be picked way before Wisconsin would be. Right? No matter what the pecking order is according to schedule. Or
right.
Record.
Right. Well, but in this world where, so many players sit out of bowl games, especially if they had a disappointing season, for their standards or whatever, which may well be the case for one of these SEC teams, then maybe we get to, get a big team win at the end of our season when they're a little underpowered, potentially.
Yes. That would be the hope, is that we end up getting one of these bigger names that should be competing against a bigger opponent than us based on this year's record, and that's going to demotivate them even more. It's like, we don't even get to play, a legitimate team. We're having to play this 6-6 Nebraska team or 7-5 Nebraska team, and we're 8-4 or we're 9-3. We should have gotten a better opponent, and that might demotivate them. And then, like you say, depending on if they're a disappointed Alabama, for example, and they maybe have 6 or 8 players that decide to walk away and prepare for the NFL draft or whatever, then all of a sudden we're playing a somewhat depleted football roster, and maybe we have a chance to get a win. So that's a possibility. But with all the new rules now, Alex, freshmen, all red shirts can participate and play in bowl games, right? That this bowl game does not count as one of the 4 games. So the red shirts are all available. So you got a team like Alabama that recruits at a top 10 level every year. Even if they lose 6 or 8 players who decide to opt out, the amount of raw talent that is stepping in to fill those shoes is inequitable to what Nebraska has.
True.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So, but there's no doubt we'll be a motivated bowl team.
That's true. And then also in the SEC, the single craziest game of the whole week was Auburn versus Texas A&M. That was away at Auburn, and they went up into a big lead, 21-0 in the second quarter. Texas A&M scored 7 by the halftime, so it's 21-7. But then Texas A&M kind of fought back in the second half and were actually up 31-28 after scoring with 4 minutes left to go in the game. But Auburn had a nice drive, got a 29-yard field goal right at the end to tie it, to bring it into overtime. Both teams actually had a missed field goal and a turnover, so they're pretty even in that regard. Good back and forth game. And then they went back and forth in overtime and went into the fourth overtime. Auburn on that one scored the 2-point conversion, so they were up. And then Texas A&M went for this little trick play, flip back kind of pass that actually was really well executed, went right into the receiver's hands, and he just dropped it. And so Auburn wins. Fans rush the field because they've had kind of a middling season, but they upset number 15th ranked Texas A&M.
Wow, that's wild. A&M is hard to figure. I've watched them for periods of a game. I've never sat down and watched a game from beginning to end with them, but I've watched sections of games with them, and at times they look unstoppable and, very athletic. And then I see the scores and they lose. And it's like, how is this happening?
Right. And then in Big 12, there was also some upsets that have set that conference into total chaos in terms of their conference championship game. BYU was playing against Arizona State, and Arizona State ended up winning that one 28-23. And I should mention Auburn won 43-41. I don't think I mentioned that. But yeah, Arizona State also got off to an early lead, was leading 21-3 by halftime. And they actually went for an onside kick in the second quarter and got it. A very ballsy play by them that worked to perfection. But later in the game, they had, I think they had two different occasions where they went for it on fourth down deep in the red zone and didn't get it. And the one in particular I'm thinking of is like later in the game when it had been closer. And if they kicked a field goal, I think they would have made it like an 8-point game. And instead, they left it at a 5-point game because they didn't get it. So that was one where I think maybe the coach was a little too aggressive. Yeah, BYU made some mistakes of their own. They missed two point conversions over the course of the game. And they got a late interception. Arizona State got a late interception to win the game to stop BYU's chance to win it.
Well, I'm not a big fan of BYU, and since I'm now down here in Phoenix, I'm kind of becoming a little bit of an Arizona State fan, and so that was kind of good to see. It also does create chaos in that conference, especially when you consider what you're going to talk about next.
Yes, that would of course be Kansas upsetting Colorado 37-21. Kansas was only up 23-21 in the third quarter. Once again they kind of went up early, and then Colorado fought back to make it a pretty close game. But from there, Kansas kind of took control in the second half. Interestingly, there were no turnovers by either team, so it was quite cleanly played. Kansas just took control of their rushing game. They led 40-20 in terms of minutes of time of possession, had 331 rushing yards.
Wow, 331 rushing yards. Well, and so again, exposing Colorado's defense.
Yep. Their quarterback had a great game. I think they had over 500 total yards rushing it. But once again, Colorado scored, a good number of points, 21 points in those 20 minutes. But yeah, they hit Shador a few times, got some sacks. And amazingly, this Kansas team is the first team in college football history with a losing record to defeat 3 consecutive top 25 ranked teams. So all of a sudden, here at the end of the year, Kansas kind of found themselves.
Well, they finally became the team that everybody thought they were going to be, right? They came into this season,
right,
preseason ranked. Everybody was very optimistic because they had this very good quarterback coming back, and they had a lot of success. But they had lost their offensive coordinator. Their offensive coordinator had gone to Penn State, and so initially the new offensive coordinator and the offensive talent just didn't mesh, right? And it took until this later part of the season for them to start clicking. And I don't know if it was just that the quarterback struggled to, really comprehend the rhythm and what the OC was trying to do, or maybe it was the OC not having a rhythm for the offense. I don't know. but obviously they're playing a lot better now, and so now they have a chance this week if they win to go bowling, and could potentially be another game that another team that we might play in a bowl game would be a 6-6 KU team.
Right. That would be interesting. Then
There's two other things about that game that I want to mention.
okay.
Again, another bad day by the refs in this game. It's kind of interesting how this follows Colorado, but there was a hit on Shadur that lots of people in social media was thinking was super cheap, and that the guy should have been ejected from the game. He was not. In fact, I don't even think there was any kind of a penalty or anything called on the play. But basically, he just took Shadur's legs out from underneath him. But because he's a quarterback and everybody wants to try to protect him because he's Deion's son and he's so good and he's the Heisman Trophy, one of the Heisman Trophy front runners, people freaked out. And it was a tough hit. I would have been angry if somebody had done that to my quarterback of my team. So I get the anger, I do, but it was kind of a little over the top in terms of how it was reacted to. But then later in the game, Shadur shoves a referee, pushes a referee, no call, no penalty, no nothing. Okay, not even after. I mean, the video goes viral. Big 12 says nothing.
Right.
Now, if that isn't an indication that they're trying to protect their potential Heisman Trophy winner, because that's the kind of crap that if people had made a big deal out of it the way they should have, okay, because you're never supposed to touch a ref. I mean, if you bump into a ref accidentally, that's one thing. But Shadur pushed the guy from the back.
Yeah. Well, right. So I watched the highlights of the game, so I saw both the moments you're talking about. Yeah, the hit to me really totally fine. I actually thought it was smart, frankly, of the Kansas player to go for his legs rather than the upper part of the body, because that's where you get into targeting stuff. But there's obviously no issues of targeting, hitting his legs. You could maybe say it was a little bit late because it was definitely after he released the ball. But that's the only complaint I could see people making about it. Then with the other thing, it should be said it wasn't a play Shadur was directly involved in. It was like two linemen or two other, players kind of were pushing each other after the play or something. And so it became a little bit of a scruff and the refs were trying to get people apart. And as part of that, Shadur pushed this ref, like you're saying. And I did see a statement like basically that it's being handled internally. And so the Big 12 and the refs aren't, punishing Shadur in any other way. And it's, the head coach's son. So I'm not very confident that there's going to be much internal punishment there.
No, absolutely not. And that was exclusively and purely an effort on the part of the Big 12 to protect their potential Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah. Real quick, we're about to talk about the conference championship games. I just remembered a little note from last week's podcast that we made after the fact in regards to Nebraska about Janiran Bonner and Jaden Lloyd. Was there something you wanted to say about them in particular, Dad?
Well, I liked both of those guys in the previous game that we lost.
I remember now. It was that Dana had said there was a kid... Right, a kid that he had noticed in practice that hadn't done much this season, and I'm going to use him in the next game. That's what it was a prediction about.
Right, correct. And it might have been one of the reasons for the timing of the Malachi Coleman announcement, because the kid that everybody is speculating what ended up being, I was wrong. It wasn't Janira or Lloyd, although both of them played really well. Now, the reason that Lloyd didn't get many snaps in this game against Wisconsin was because he was sick, right? So he did not practice like for 3 days last week. So he just didn't have enough prep time to be ready to be a significant factor. It would not surprise me if he plays more this week. Now, Janiran Bonner, he came into this game, and I was excited to see what he might do. And then he fumbled on his first completion. It was kind of a bad set of circumstances. I mean, frankly, Dylan hung him out to dry. Dylan was trying to do this little flip pass. Janiran caught it and then was immediately just rocked by a Wisconsin linebacker and jarred him free of the ball. And so in the Dana Holgerson offense, if you have an illegal procedure penalty, if you have a fumble, you go to the bench and we next guy up. Now, if the next guy up doesn't do any better than you, then you might be brought back in at some point later in the game. But if the guy who replaces you is playing okay, you're not playing again. At least not in that game, because that will teach you that you have to focus and concentrate 100% on every play. There is no room for that. Right? Accountability.
Right. And I think you're going to mention who was the player who.
Oh, yeah. His name is Clark. I apologize. I don't remember his first name, but he is I think we're currently playing him at wide receiver. Okay. But he's a heck of an athlete. Was not necessarily highly regarded, but he is the son of a former Nebraska great running back Ken Clark, who was one of my favorite running backs of all time. Ended up having a great NFL career, played many years for the Indianapolis Colts. And it's his son. And doggone it, I can't remember his first name, but everybody seemed to suggest that was the kid. And he did play. I don't think he got any receptions or anything, but he was definitely in the rotation and played some snaps in this game against Wisconsin. But he's got a bright future, and he's also like 6'5", just like Malachi.
Okay, there we go. All right, so now back to the national conversation. Obviously, we've got the conference championship games coming up, not this week, but the following week. And some of them have already been locked in terms of who's going to be in them. As we mentioned last week, Oregon is locked in on the Big Ten side. And then Ohio State is in control of their own destiny. If they beat Michigan this upcoming week, then they're definitely in. But if they lose to Michigan, then it opens it up for Penn State and Indiana. Although when I was looking at the two teams, I actually, because one of the tiebreakers, if you don't have a matchup between the two teams directly, is score against common opponents. And when I looked at that, like Penn State lost less badly to Ohio State. They beat Washington by more than Indiana did. Interestingly, both teams are playing kind of lesser opponents this upcoming week. I think one's playing Purdue and one's playing Maryland or something like that, who the other team beat. So I think both of them are going to kind of be incentivized to try to run up the score and make it a big blowout victory for their side, just to make their resume look better in the off chance that Ohio State loses to Michigan.
Right. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's total points or if it's, the fact that in two cases already of similar opponents, Indiana, we didn't play. Indiana had probably one of their most explosive games against us, right?
Yeah.
Dominant performance. And we didn't play Penn State. So that's not in the comparison, right?
Right.
So that does not bode well for Indiana.
Even though,
in that case.
As you pointed out to me, Indiana overall against their general opponents has put up bigger scores, bigger spreads of wins. But if what really matters is the common opponents, then on that front, actually Penn State is better.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think Indiana's chances of getting into the conference championship are pretty small. It's going to be Ohio State or Penn State.
Right. And then in the ACC, SMU is actually the team that is guaranteed to be in. And then Miami is the team in control of their destiny. If they win this weekend against Syracuse, then they're definitely in. But if they lose and then Clemson beats their team this week, then I guess they would make it in and play SMU.
Right. But Miami's not going to lose to Syracuse.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be Miami SMU.
I will say, I think I looked. Syracuse has a good record. They're like
Yes,
8-3 or something like that.
I think you are correct. That is true.
Yeah. And then in the SEC, obviously a lot of chaos over there. So now, because of all that, Georgia is now locked in. So they're definitely going to be in the game. And then the winner of Texas versus Texas A&M basically makes it in, which is quite fascinating because Texas A&M lost to Auburn. Right, they're one of the teams that got upset. They're currently 9-3, but I guess even with all that, if they beat Texas, then they're in. That's just how the tiebreakers all work out.
Really?
Yes.
That is fascinating. Against Georgia, who's 9-2. Georgia's 9-2. Texas is 10-1. It just seems like Texas would already be in, and it's Texas versus Georgia.
I think it's because if Texas lost, both A&M and Texas would have 2 losses in the conference, and then Texas A&M would have the head-to-head tiebreaker. So that would be the difference.
Because A&M
beats Texas.
Oh, because A&M would beat Texas in this scenario.
Right.
Got it. Okay. Now I get it.
Right. So that's obviously a very big game this weekend to decide who goes into that championship game.
Interesting.
And then in the Big 12, it's too complicated to really go into. There are 9 teams in contention that could potentially make it into the title. But apparently if the top 4 all currently stay, if they all win, then Iowa State and Arizona State would make it in through the tiebreakers.
Right. Because you got Arizona State 9-2, Iowa State 9-2, BYU 9-2, Kansas State's 8-3, Colorado's 8-3, but they only have 2 losses in the conference because they lost to us.
Yep.
And maybe Kansas State's in that same boat. I don't know, but yeah. So there's just a lot of craziness there. And Kansas State plays Kansas, I think. So Kansas State's ranked 24th.
No, Kansas State plays Iowa State, who's
they play Iowa State
in one of those teams in contention.
Oh, that's going to be an interesting game.
Yeah.
So who does Kansas play? I'm surprised it's not Kansas State for the last game of the year. Interesting.
Yeah, we'll have to look that up. But yeah, so that's how all the main championship games are looking currently. So there's a lot of interesting implications to this week of college football. In terms of the playoff rankings, those did come out. And, those SEC and Big 12 schools that lost obviously tumbled down the rankings quite a bit. So I'd say the biggest beneficiary of that is the ACC. Because right now, SMU is now been bumped up to 9th in this current standing. So now there's the possibility that the SEC only gets 3 teams in rather than 4, and that other spot that might have been filled by an Alabama or whatever is filled in by the second best team in the ACC instead.
Interesting. But the thing is that SMU is going to end up playing, let's say, if all these things play out the way we expect them to, SMU is going to play Miami in the conference championship game. So then it becomes this conversation we've had where do you punish SMU for playing in the conference championship game because they'll go into that game likely ranked 9th or higher, right, in the CFP, and then you lose in that conference championship game. Do you then tumble below 12 and not get in? And then Alabama moves up from 13 to 12 because, that's going to be very interesting.
Right. Well, yeah, that has been a big point of conversation. I'd say in the past couple of weeks of college football is like Tennessee, right, in the SEC, because of how things work out, they're not going to the SEC championship game no matter what. But in some ways, I feel like they're happy about that because it's like, okay, we don't have a chance to lose there. We're basically guaranteed, as long as we win our last game, to make it into the playoff. We won't get the bye or anything, but we're confident that we'll beat whoever we have to play.
Right, and that's the thing is that, because Tennessee's 8th, SMU is 9th, and Indiana University is 10th. So IU is going to be the one that ends up getting screwed out of this deal. Because then 11th is Boise State, which is an automatic, assuming they win their conference
Right.
playoff.
Right.
Yeah.
IU, well, because they lost to Ohio State and they lost kind of badly. IU is on the outskirts, but I think they can still make it in depending on how things
Yeah.
go.
Well, but if they fall out and they put an 8-3 Alabama team ahead of a 10-1 Indiana team after all the years of them not looking beyond win-loss and putting way too much emphasis on win-loss, and then on this year they don't, you're going to hear from me. That'll be a podcast for people to remember.
Right. Well, it is interesting because I do think, obviously the college football playoff committee, they have ears. They're hearing this conversation. So I think,
Oh yeah,
that is going to be their major test is like, how much do you punish the people who play in that conference championship game? On the other hand, you've got, some weird scenarios, right? Like if Texas A&M, right, makes it in, if they beat Texas and they make it in the SEC championship game, right, versus Georgia, and then they lose, so then they'd be what, like
they're ranked 20th in this week's poll. So if they were to beat Texas, that would obviously catapult them back up quite a bit, right? But it probably wouldn't get them into the top 10.
Right. Well,
or if it did, it would be right at 10.
I guess my point is, so you have a 9-3 Texas A&M team, right, that beat Texas, that's in the SEC championship game, but then they lose to Georgia, so now they're 9-4. So are you going to keep in a 9-4 SEC runner up versus a 10-2 SMU, that lost to Miami,
or more specifically a 10-2 Tennessee team that didn't play in the SEC championship game?
Right.
That there's all kinds of scenarios that don't come out very cleanly for them. And I think if you have an 11-1 Indiana team whose only loss is to the number 2 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes, who might very well end up being number 1 if they beat Oregon in the conference championship. If they win this weekend and then they play Oregon and beat Oregon, which is what I predicted. You may recall at the beginning of the year, I predicted that Oregon would beat Ohio State in the regular season game, and then Ohio State would beat Oregon in the conference championship game. That was my preseason prediction for the Big Ten Conference.
Right.
But so you just can't punish Indiana that much.
Right.
And yet they already have. I mean, they dropped from whatever they were, 4th or whatever to 10th with one loss against the number 2 team in the country.
Yeah, well, but I mean, you look at some of those other ones, right? Alabama, Ole Miss, they dropped 6 and 5 places as well.
Sure.
So Indiana dropped about the same.
Right. Except that Alabama lost to an Oklahoma team that's not even ranked. Right. So that's a way worse loss than losing to Ohio State at Ohio State. Right. You follow me?
Right.
I mean, it's illogical, but here's the problem. You're going to have the talking heads of the ESPN whose money's at stake here, and their programming is at stake. And I guarantee you they're going to lean to the SEC because of their programming relationship with the SEC. That's what I'm predicting.
And admittedly, Indiana does have a weak strength of schedule compared to a lot of the other teams near the top. That is something that's going against them.
That is true.
But what this all was making me think about was, longtime listeners may recall when they were talking about playoff expansion, I was actually in favor of a smaller expansion of 8 teams rather than 12, because I thought that would be less dramatic, less of a big jump,
a major,
right, from 4 to 12. But admittedly, all this talk about the conference championship runner-ups and everything has me thinking back on that and maybe reconsidering, because thinking about that, if it was a similar setup to now where, the 4 main champions are guaranteed to be in, then you'd only have 4 spots left. And so then the competition for those becomes even more fierce, and you're definitely going to have some runner-ups from the conferences left out. Whereas with the 12-team
Right.
playoff, it gives you some more wiggle room to get more of those teams in there, which I think is a good thing, because I don't think the playoff should not set the precedent that you'd rather be the third best team in your conference and sit out, because that gives you a better chance of making the playoff. You want to encourage teams to know you want to make it to that championship game, and we're going to reward you for getting there even if you lose.
Absolutely. And I hope that that's what happens. I think that's what needs to happen.
Yes.
Well, and the other thing about this is it'll be interesting after all the dust is settled and we know who those are. Those teams, 10, 11, and 12 at the bottom end of that, how well do they do?
Right.
Right? How many games do they win?
Right.
Do they actually get in this playoff? Do they get to the finals? I'm going to predict that it's going to be a very rare occurrence.
Well, get to the finals, sure, but maybe one of them gets to the semifinals. I could see that happening.
Yeah, they could maybe get to the semis.
Or Boise State, coming in from the group of 5.
Well, in this case, Boise State might get one of the top 4.
Right.
Right, and so then they get a bye, so they don't even start into the playoff until there's only 8 teams left. Right, so
True.
they only have a quarterfinal and then a semifinal to get through.
They're benefiting from the fact that the Big 12 is such a mess at this point.
Exactly right.
All right, so we're running a little long here, but we're going to make some quick predictions for these big upcoming games. The first one being Texas versus Texas A&M. It is a home game for A&M, so that goes in their favor. But obviously, they just had a heartbreaking, quadruple overtime loss to Auburn, and Texas has looked like one of the best teams in the country, basically the whole year. So even though it's a home game for A&M, I think I'm going to have to go with Texas on this one and say that they win, let's say 38 to 28 over Texas A&M.
Well, that's a good score, Alex. I agree with you. Although these these end of year rivalries can often not go the way you expect them to, right? Like that they don't go according to chalk. And so that with that being said, I still say Texas is so much better as a team this year than A&M, and so much more consistent that even though it's a home game for A&M, I'm going to go with Texas as well. But I am going to say that they're going to spend a little time feeling each other out early in the game, maybe, and so maybe it won't be as high a scoring. So I'm going to say it's going to end up being, let's see, I'm going to say 35 for Texas and only 21 for A&M.
And to answer your earlier question, Kansas is playing Baylor this week.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the big game, us coming from Michigan. Of course, we've got to talk about the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry game. It is a home game for Ohio State this year. And like you say, even though all of the cards would be pointing towards Ohio State, apparently they're like 20-point favorites on the spread. But Michigan, that's a rivalry game that can always go crazy no matter where the teams are ranked. It is a away game for Michigan this year. It's at home for Ohio State, and Michigan's won the past few. So there's a lot of Ohio State players, especially their seniors, that are hungry to get a big win over Michigan on this one. But for the Michigan fans, they did just have one of their best games of the season against Northwestern, where they crushed them 50-6. So is it possible that Michigan's found something and will be able to get a narrow win over Ohio State?
I absolutely think that's very possible. Because again, Ohio State has looked vulnerable all season. Their defense is good, not great. Their offense is inconsistent, but filled with incredible talent. And their quarterback has been okay, but not great. So all of those things point to the fact that I don't think it's a slam dunk that Ohio State's going to win this thing without any problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Have you talked to Brian at all about this one?
Well, he does expect, of course, because he's always paranoid. He's the sky is falling and whines the whole time, and then they come back and win, and he irritates the heck out of me with that. but he's expecting a loss, and it's probably not going to get close. But they're excited, of course, because they got the number one quarterback in the country, much like we got Dylan last year. They got the number one quarterback in the country to flip from LSU just in the last week.
Yes, that was a big news story. I think I'm going to go ahead and say that Ohio State wins, but I think Michigan, for the reasons I mentioned, will make it closer than people think. I think they'll beat the spread for sure, but Ohio State will still win. A little bit lower scoring. So let's say 28 Ohio State to 20 Michigan.
There you go. I like that score. I'm going to say that they're going to end up having more scoring than that. So I'm going to say it's going to be 38 Ohio State to 31 Michigan.
Still about a 1-score difference. So we're in agreement there. And then we'll just briefly mention, but there are some other good games going on this week. You've got South Carolina versus Clemson in the ACC. As mentioned earlier, if Miami wins their game against Syracuse, then Clemson's shut out of the ACC championship game regardless. But they still, maybe have a chance to make it to the playoff somehow, some way. So them beating South Carolina would be a big win. And then Notre Dame has to go play USC. It's at home for USC, and USC did beat UCLA in a different rivalry game this past weekend. So that's a potential upset for a playoff-bound Notre Dame team.
Oh, yeah, that is. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think Notre Dame's going to win that one.
After you thought Army would beat them last week, now you flipped your tune.
Well, yeah, I have. Yep, I'm conceding. Notre Dame is good.
Yeah. Also, number one Oregon has to go play Washington, though it is a home game for Oregon. And then you've got, of course, Auburn, Alabama, home game for Alabama, but two teams with very different momentum. Alabama with a very disappointing loss, Auburn with an amazing overtime win.
I'm still saying Alabama's winning that one.
Yeah. I saw on that Bus with the Boys podcast, they had an Alabama fan there, and he said, I'm happy we're not playing them in Auburn this year. If it was at Auburn, I'd be worried for sure, but it's not.
Yeah. Wow. You know what, Alex? I'm amazed at that Michigan Ohio State odds.
Yeah,
that is crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
okay. Any listeners out there, put money on Michigan, man.
Right.
Put money on Michigan.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
we'll talk. We'll talk.
Yep. I thought it was a pretty good betting odds line too. They're doing their thing. They're getting people to bet on Michigan by making the spread that big.
What do they know? It's what does Vegas know?
Well, and admittedly,
they're not wrong.
We're saying that Michigan's win over Northwestern was impressive, right? They scored 50 points, but also Northwestern's one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, so we shouldn't,
I get
take
that
too much out of that.
But other than Indiana, who has Ohio State blown out among the upper mid tier of the Big Ten?
Right, like we played them close. They played it close against Penn State.
Right. I mean, they just have not been, because their defense is not great. Wow, that is an attractive odds.
Hey.
I would say I'm amazed. I'm amazed.
Well, there you go. You should be getting out your pocketbook then.
Well, maybe so. All right. Wow. So, football fans, this is an incredible week. There's some crazy odds, I feel like.
Well, and I will say, so I'm just looking back. Actually, that's the wrong score. Let's scroll down here. Obviously, they did just beat Indiana by a solid margin. So that goes in Ohio State's favor.
Yes.
And they beat Iowa 35-7. Obviously had the very close loss to Oregon, crushed Purdue, beat Northwestern. Yeah. So you're right. Really, the best wins on their schedule are against Indiana, obviously Penn State, and then against Iowa. Those are their best 3 wins.
Yeah. And again, even though I know that Iowa's a good team, this Iowa team is not a great team, and they're not even as good as last year's Iowa team, right? So I just think Ohio State. Yeah. Wow. Wow.
All right. Well, thank you for sticking around with us for this podcast. We had a lot to cover today, and we'll be coming to you in person, as we mentioned, for our next episode. The Nebraska game's on a Friday, so we got just a few days left to wait for that one. And we'll be coming back to you with our predictions for the conference championship games and our feelings on how we think the playoff may end up working out.
Yes, that should be a good time. So many things are going to be clearer, obviously, after this is over.
Yep. So if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us if you search for College Football Throwdown on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can leave us a ring or review there. We always love hearing feedback from the fans. So thank you all there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.